title. Did we title this? I can title it in post. But all right. Yeah, and we're live, so
What's going on?
first time in person.
I'm back in Wisconsin, so we are streaming. And yeah,
I'm gonna get this light behind us here.
as the title will hopefully say, we're going to talk about a debate between Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek. It's about capitalism and Marxism with regards to human happiness and flourishing. And it was a super good debate. It's like 2 hours long, so that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. So probably check out the debate before you hear what we're talking about with regards to the debate, or just listen to us babble on about something that you have no idea what we're talking about. That's what we usually do anyway. So
Getting this light up here too.
So yeah, should be good. Should be fun.
Yeah.
It was a super good debate. I thought it was really interesting. Parts of it I didn't like. Mark, do you just want to say your general thoughts on it?
I would say Peterson lost the first half of the debate as he overshot. He came in with his normal stances on communism, and Zizek was totally prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. What were some of Peterson's? Can you remember some of his fundamental axioms that Marx and what's the other dude's name?
Zizek.
No, the other guy who wrote the manifesto.
Oh,
well, some of the fundamental axioms of the Communist Manifesto that were wrong.
Marx and Hegel.
Hegel, yeah. So I wish I would have written them down because I thought his critique of Marxism was really good when he went back and he basically just points out that a lot of the things that this document takes as axioms are wrong. And you can't really blame the guys because they didn't have, for a lot of it, because they didn't have like the same kind of social scientific data that we have today on that kind of topic.
And also at this time, communism was still a relatively new idea. No one would have really faulted you for trying it. Also, so
yeah, it was a very new idea.
Yeah, and they tried it en masse in the United States, actually in Texas of all places. At a place that's now called the Colony.
Really?
Yeah.
Before or after the manifesto?
This was after the manifesto. There was a number of communes that were started around the same time. Zizek talks about the Paris Commune at this.
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing roughly a similar time, but basically there was a large outpouring of public funds and stuff to it, and resources to try this in these small controlled locations.
Yeah. So for me, one of my critiques of Zizek was that one distinction he doesn't make is between these, because he's not a communist in the way that I or Peterson, because I had the same question as Peterson. Why does he identify with Marxism if he's a very original guy? He's got a lot of original thoughts. He likes to start local, have grassroots type of stuff. And, he's not a guy who I would think would set up the economy in the way that the kind of communists did. And so I agree with him on a lot of the stuff on most of the stuff that Zizek said. And I'm just why do you identify with such a murderous ideology when you have so many good ideas that I agree with?
Yeah, well, it's also kind of the thing where if you look at someone like Brett and Eric Weinstein, their brand of socialism is kind of the same way, where it's very reasonable as far as how they go about thinking it. But when you run into the boilerplate commie on the street that's just fucking running around with his iPhone, drinking his Starbucks, and wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, you're just running into the most radical fringe portion of that ideology, and that's unfortunately what runs the ideology.
That's what I was going to say. Is it seems like even on the right and on the left that it's always the radical fringe part of the ideology that actually manifests itself in the world, because those are the people who are so captivated by their own ideas, or not even their own ideas, but by thoughts and ideas, that they're the people who actually go out and try and change the world.
Yeah.
And so you can have a country that's primarily just centrist people. You could say central right, central left people who agree on most stuff, but the people who actually end up running the country and running the economy and making the systems are the people who are the most motivated, so the most radical.
Yeah. Also, as far as the flaws in the ideology really come out when you start getting into the legislative and prescription portions of it.
Yeah.
Because
So I didn't like the way Zizek too. He basically just gives critiques of capitalism, most of which I think all of which I agree with. Essentially, It's got negative externalities as far as the environment. It's not, and he gives some good critiques, psychoanalytical critiques of human happiness and flourishing that I think both of the guys agree on too. So like, I don't know. It was hard for me to. I felt like Jordan Peterson didn't lose the first part of the debate because the debate was Marxism versus capitalism, and so like he had to go through to the Marxist document and make a critique of that based off of human flourishing and happiness.
The reason why I say lost is he came out with his same stuff, and he claimed to have read Zizek's stuff, which I don't.
Yeah.
Neither of us can confirm whether he did or not.
He kind of says at the beginning though that he didn't familiarize himself enough with Zizek's stuff.
Yeah, but
one of the things that I don't like people doing though is playing some kind of, it's like a verbal sleight of hand where you can, God, what's it? It's like the no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Like that wasn't real socialism, that wasn't real communism. But you can also say like, I'm a Marxist, but then when someone says a fundamental tenet of Marxism, you can say, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And so, like, I understand that Zizek does it more just to be a provocateur, but I don't think that he grants enough. I don't think that he's as scared as he should be of radical fringe groups who actually identify with the Marxist ideology and try and run society based off of that.
Yeah. Also, Zizek, he grew up for the most part, like I'm guessing he spent most of his life in Slovakia or Eastern Europe. And that was...
He did. And so he's got definitely a different perspective on life too.
Yeah. Well, that's like, which like parts of that, like Czechoslovakia, they were far enough away from the central power of the USSR where they were able to get away with a lot more stuff than what actually happened in the USSR. So that might be influencing his opinion on what like the USSR and communism actually is.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that. He doesn't seem like a communist to me. He doesn't seem anything like a communist. Like there's like I couldn't even name one thing that he has in common with someone who would identify as a communist.
Yeah.
Other than they have critiques of capitalism, but I'm a capitalist and I have many critiques. I agree with all of his critiques on capitalism.
Yeah. Well, that's part of supporting a system is you have to be able to critique it as well. And like a lot of communists and a lot of the radicals in either side can't ever get to that point.
Yeah.
So
that's so interesting. You know, it's weird though not that all radical people are dumb, but I think that a lot of them tend to willfully dumb themselves down to actual objections to that might be objections against their ideology. And a guy like Zizek is smart enough that he couldn't be an ideologue because he's just too smart, man. The guy's a genius. There's no doubt about that. Even Jordan Peterson gives him that. Like, that's the hardest question I've ever been asked. So it's tough.
Peterson himself is a really brilliant guy in the way that he started picking apart Zizek, and probably about the second third the debate was pretty smart too. Which Peterson's always known for being able to pick up on the small little words and phrases within what people are saying to get the upper hand.
Yeah.
But
I think Peterson's very open to acknowledge the problems of capitalism too. It's just that the problems that and maybe it's just that they've both seen what they perceive as different sides of problems manifest themselves in the world, like what you were just saying. That Jordan Peterson has obviously in his personal and professional life seen the manifestation of a radical leftist and what that's been doing to college universities.
He's also seen how to help people and how it actually, like how helping people actually work. Like you don't help people by just providing them things and stuff. You help them by, hey, here's a challenge, go out, get over that challenge.
That's one of the things too that Zizek takes. Well, let's say it's a fundamental axiom of the Communist Manifesto that Jordan Peterson critiques is that life can be boiled down just to purely economic terms, and I hate when people take a complex social system or a complex problem and boil it down to binary terms, proletariat and bourgeoisie, like that. You just can't look at life like there's a million different variables and there's a hierarchy amongst all the variables. And I think Jordan Peterson's really good at explaining this about how hierarchies work within one variable. Let's say it's just a competence hierarchy, which nothing's purely that, but then there's also a hierarchy of hierarchies, and that makes like a meta hierarchy, right? And that's where the most deep stories and archetypes come from.
Also, it's the invitation to play multiple iterations, whether it's a game or like being invited to do something. You're always participating in furthering or lowering yourself within that hierarchy as well.
Yeah. So me and Isaac were talking about with regards to this too, that Isaac loves like the, Piaget and all that he has to say about games. And basically that like life is a game. I was saying that people don't actually follow their ideologies, because if they, and the people who do tend to be the most insufferable people, like we were just talking about. And Sack made a point that well, they still play the game because life is a game. So like they're playing whether they're resenting it or not. And I don't know, it's when you resent the game itself, like when you resent the hierarchy itself, that's when you really see the craziest type of stuff, man. People who are against the most innocuous guys, like Mitt Romney or something like that. And I'm not saying he's the best political candidate by any means, but
he's very vanilla as far as.
But he's no the crazy guy. He's like the nicest guy ever.
Yeah. Or like when people show up to protest, like Ben Shapiro.
I always think of that too. And I guess I could see it because Ben Shapiro is willfully provocative, but still the kind of stuff that, and you can tell they're just they're not even puppets of an ideology, because they can't even give a good reason why they're protesting, or a reason why they're protesting. Like they'll say, you could say, what is it that Ben Shapiro said that you didn't like? And they couldn't come up with one phrase.
Yeah.
That's how people are literally just puppets of words of other people. And that's like I like how Jordan Peterson, and well, it starts with the Bible says that, you speak the world into existence. And it's like your words actually have an impact on how people act, whether it's good or crazy.
Also, like one thing that I've noticed, like following Shapiro's career, Milo and like Steven Crowder and stuff like that, is they usually start off very provocative to get notoriety and fame.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a while where that like go to a campus and just stack up a known count was very popular. Now, I don't want to say that people have gotten smarter, but about the possibility of that, but it certainly happens a lot less often. Mm-hmm. Whether that could just be the maturity of like the people speaking, or just
it could just be us too, our transformation.
Yeah.
But there's something interesting too, that like, let's say you built the perfect socioeconomic system where there was actually just a hierarchy off of competence, and it was that. First of all, some people are just going to reject that because people resent competence itself. People don't want to work sometimes, like some people at least. So you're still going to have disenfranchised people. And also, one of Zizek's good critiques of human happiness and flourishing is that people don't want to be content. People don't want to be happiness. Like when you're in a state of contentness, it's a state of boredom, and a state of perfect order isn't something, and this, Peterson agrees with this too, isn't something that's even desirable for humans, even though we might think it is. Like it's this golden egg that we're always pursuing. But in all reality, if we built the perfect system, we'd find just the right way to mess it up just enough so that it added a chaotic adventure to our lives. And that's what Zizek says in the middle of the debate. I love that line.
Yeah. People will find a way to pull a grenade in a crowd and not give a shit.
Yeah, maybe that. Well, yeah. But, we strive for that kind of adventure. And where was I going with this?
Well, there's also...
You think about that with ideas, too. Like I feel like I've got a good idea of how a lot of stuff works. And I've got an idea of what I think is the right way a lot of stuff works. But like alt-right figures, or even like Andrew Yang, like pretty radical leftist figures, like their ideas still capture me, because it's like, oh man, what if there's something that could produce something better? Or what if like there's always this next thing that's going to be like that aha moment that just hits me and and blows my mind once again.
Well, Andrew Yang even is a really interesting case, because I think he started off as a businessman. Whatever happened, like 2008, like his business ended up going under, or he ended up selling out, something like that. And he ended up just moving and kind of traveling the country and writing this book that he kind of bases his campaign and stuff off of. And it's really data driven for like what he's what his policy goals and stuff are. Is that's one of the things I noticed as far as like him and his discussion with Shapiro.
Yeah.
Because it was very data driven. Both of them had a very data driven discussion, and it was
maybe that's what attracted me to a guy like Andrew Yang. You know, that the guy, you know, he at least puts up a solid case for what he's talking about, and you can tell he's thought about it. He's not dumb either. Like, he's a really sensible guy, and he's a politician too. I noticed in his talk with Shapiro, Andrew Yang, for people who don't notice, is this guy who says that everyone needs to have a $1,000, what is it, a freedom inheritance every month?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's
$1,000 a month freedom like inheritance
freedom
from the government,
grant or something
from the government. I assume that's going to be taken from taxpayers' pockets. So, you know, it's a lot of money. It's what, 3.3 trillion. So it's quite a bit of money. That's yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, he says that if people do that, then they'll be more creative in their free time. They'll pursue arts and stuff like that.
Which I don't know that creativity is such a good thing either. Just the way I've heard people like Andrew Klavan and stuff talk about it, like you have to keep wounds and stuff open. You can't really like evolve or get past a problem. You kind of have to just dwell on it and use it as far as like inspiration or like how like a character or something would deal with it. It doesn't seem like a very healthy way to go about living long term.
It's weird. So, you can always boil everything down to this meta, I'd say binary, but it's not binary. It's a spectrum of order and chaos, you know? So like there's some utility in being an open and creative person, but there's also not utility in being too open or too creative, because like you said, like some of the smartest people in the world and in history go crazy because, you know, you can't get over a fundamental problem unless you take something as a fundamental axiom. And if you're ever willing to dwell out into new things, well, you'll never get to the end of one thing. And that'll drive a guy crazy. And in the same sense, you don't want to take everything as as your fundamental axiom and just go through life, pinballing straight through, because, well, you're not going to have any adventure in your life. You're going to become too comfortable. And then
you're going to get in a rut.
You feel a different kind of sadness and slowness and anxiety. I think I've been on both sides of this spectrum too in my life. And, but what I don't like about Andrew Yang too is that it's the same fundamental presupposition that life is purely economic, that people don't have the access to economic resources that they need to be creative. I just don't know how you can actually make a logical economic case for that, considering the amount of resources that people have access to nowadays. I mean, the poorest people in the United States have iPhones.
Yeah, you could literally fly across the United States, change your geographical location in a matter of hours.
It's
for
wild.
Like super cheap.
It's wild. And like, okay, I'm not saying that we're all doing what we should be doing in always getting the next best material thing, because I don't like the, this consumerist materialist look in the world either. But if you want to boil things down to a material perspective, the case that's got to be made is that the world is way better today than it was back then. And it's not because of an inheritance tax, Even like if you look some stats on humanprogress.org, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
The child mortality rate is better today in Africa than it was in Great Britain 60 years ago. It's just mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
what is it? Something like 250,000 people every day are connected to power. Like 100,000 or something like that are connected to clean drinking water every day.
Yeah. So I guess my thing is I'm always just wary of people who boil something like economics down to or something like wealth and happiness down to a purely economic thing. And if we want to do that, I think you can make a pretty good economic case against stuff like an inheritance tax, which is kind of what people like Milton Friedman do. But it's something that's so much deeper than that, man. It's like,
yeah, but Milton Friedman also makes a case for UBI, which is basically Yang's strategy as
universal
far as
basic income. Yeah.
And he makes a very similar case as what Yang does, where it's an alternative to welfare.
Yeah. Which, that kind of makes me like Andrew Yang a little bit more, that he's willing to admit that there's problems in the welfare system today, and then people take advantage of it, and like there's just a lot of stuff that I can't have that kind of double think in my head, like if taxing cigarettes disincentivizes cigarette use, taxing income's got to disincentivize making income, right? And this is actually how it works in the world too. Like there are real situations, like real economic situations, where people will be close enough to the next income bracket that it's worth them not making $2,000 extra because they'll make more money if they can stay in the income bracket that they're at.
It's also, who does it penalize if you don't go up to the next income bracket or something like that, where like it's penalizing the people around you, it's penalizing the business you would have started, the products you would have created by moving up to that next level. Just like with the cigarette tax, it primarily like affects like people in poverty, minorities, stuff like that. It's holding them back from attaining a higher.
Yeah, there's that too. When you do boil things down to like economic stuff like that, yeah, you can make a strong case against it. And Thomas Sowell does an amazing job of that. Like he's the best at making that kind of case that people make feel good policies just to it's just self-aggrandizement, just making themselves feel good about what they're doing, virtue signaling to others, when in all reality the effects of their policies are really harmful to the people they're purporting to be helping. And he says that they use those people like mascots for their ideology. And so Thomas Sowell's really good. He's an economist too, who takes this economic view.
It's also one of these guys that debunked the wage gap back in the 80s, which is hilarious because
I just saw that Iceland made a law that they're going to pay women as much as men.
Yeah.
Or that women cannot be paid as little as a man. And listen, I'm totally okay with that law, because the way I see it, if women and men are actually doing this equal amount of work, making equal amount of sacrifices, the equation doesn't come down to just being women and men, Now, this doesn't, the way I see this is going to manifest itself in Iceland and places who follow Iceland's type policy is a woman who doesn't make the same sacrifices as a man, who isn't willing to work as long of hours, who isn't willing to do the same kind of labor, who isn't willing to make a job change, a location change. There's a ton of different factors to this economic equation. Is going to be paid the same as the man who is making all of those sacrifices. That's where it gets a little dicey for me, because then it's like, it's not rectification of an injustice. It's just revenge based on your quixotic quest for cosmic justice.
Also, a thing about Iceland doing that is, I remember watching there's a YouTube channel called Independent Man, where he's also an economist. He goes a bit more in depth as far as the legal stuff on this, but he was saying that they've had laws on the books as far as equal pay for men and women since the mid to late 60s, and they're in Iceland, specifically Iceland. And what they're doing is they're trying to fix a problem that is already fixed, but there are multiple complications and factors that go into what people are currently being paid, and they're not going to end up solving anything in the end as well. But
yeah, if you look at the Supreme Court jurisprudential stuff in the United States, how the equal rights laws have manifested themselves, you can see a lot of crazy takes on this kind of stuff, where it turns into a group mentality, and it's essentially anti-individual as the primary locus of policy, which is anti-United States fundamentally. And you can see a lot of Supreme Court justices take this kind of view, and a lot of them who are still around today. RBG.
Yeah.
So.
Well, she also Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
I've seen some crazy takes on this kind of stuff. And so, on this quest for cosmic justice, but justice to them means equality of outcome based off of arbitrary groups that I get to choose. Of course, it's my groups that I get to choose, And one of Jordan Peterson's good critiques of this, of not using the individual as the fundamental locus of public policy, is that you can indefinitely split people into groups. You can divide people as many times as you want into categories until all of a sudden you're down to 1 in 8 billion. You're down to the individual. And the idea behind individualism and the individual as the fundamental locus is that is the ultimate minority. So if you actually care about minority rights, you don't think about the rights of people based off of their skin color or their sex or anything like that. And that's what I don't really like about, new feminism. It's like it's waging a war on men.
Yeah, well, the intersectional, it more started in the third wave of feminism.
Yeah.
We're kind of in the fourth wave, depending on who you ask, but
The fourth wave's interesting. Well, whatever you would call the fourth wave.
Yeah, well, that's why I say depending on who you ask, but
it's interesting. Can you go through the waves of feminism? I could try.
First wave, it was basically women's suffrage, right to vote.
Women need to have the same rights as men.
And then they kind of started getting in the workplace after that. 50s, 60s hit. It was more workplace equality, that second wave.
Mm-hmm.
Basically more opportunities outside the home, not just inside. And then third wave started like early 90s, kind of.
So third wave is essentially anti-women as a housewife. Like it's anti-family.
Well, it's
that
more
women
anti-men.
And men are equal?
It's women are superior to men. The first two waves were basically women are equal to men or equivalent.
Yeah.
More in the
the crazy thing that's been happening is like where feminism has this intersect in the intersectionality scale with transgender ideology and transgender
being a woman just basically becomes a costume that you put on any day of the week that you decide to.
And you see people like making some awesome satire out of this kind of ideology. Like I think maybe we've talked about him before, but the bodybuilder rapper Zuby in Great Britain, who he's not a bodybuilder, he's just a weightlifter. He's a strong guy. He identified as a woman for a day and then destroyed the women's deadlift record, and then on a separate day destroyed the women's bench press record, like was doing it for reps. And then after that he tweeted out the video and got really famous for it and said, if you don't believe that I'm a woman, you're a bigot.
It could also just be him shit posting just so he gets the world record.
It was definitely him shit posting, but
shit posters. Britain has the best shit posters. First of all,
the best.
They're the greatest shit posters. They're the best shit posters. Everybody says so.
One thing. Oh man. Yeah, one thing that Jordan Peterson explains this really well too is that women and men are more the same than they are different. Way more the same than they are different. But that doesn't mean the differences don't matter. Well, and you see this manifest itself. It's also not that
the differences aren't very significant either. It's like even the personality differences matter a ton as far as like neurological health, like as far as like outcomes, as far as at work. Like men tend to be less agreeable, so they attain higher management positions.
Less agreeable, more conscientious.
Yeah. Well, they're slightly more conscientious, and depending on how you want to break down the openness spectrum.
One thing too is that they're okay. So men are less agreeable than women. Let's just take it on that. The majority of men, like 60%, I think it is, are the same in agreeableness as 60% of the women. But that's what I was saying is it manifests itself at the extreme. And the person who's a CEO of a huge company is the most extremely competitive, conscientious, and also just competent person, usually.
Also likely very intelligent, low neuroticism.
Yeah, intelligent as well. And so that's where it really manifests itself. So if you want to take an actual analysis of society, those positions are going to be the people who are the most conscientious, the most disagreeable. And it just so happens that at the extreme, if you take, I can't remember the exact data. I wish I had.
It's something like 5% of the population commits like 95% of the crime.
Yeah, it's something like that. So the top 10% of men are going to be more disagreeable than like 98% of women, or some. Don't take me for those numbers exactly, but it's some really compelling evidence. And it's the same for like, let's say the bottom 10% women, are going to be more agreeable than the majority of men. That doesn't mean anything that all women are agreeable or that all men are conscientious. It's not just a binary equation. It just means that at the extremes where things actually manifest themselves in the world, especially in situations like a CEO and stuff like that, you're going to see big disparities. And if you shoot for equality of outcome in that kind of situation, well, the results aren't good generally.
Yeah, you're also going to miss out on the opportunities that could have been with the proper people in there with the proper merits,
That's
and
one
not
thing.
shoveling in people based on their physical, well,
And that's
qualifications, I would put it, not like merit.
it's not merit.
Yeah.
That's back to Marxism though too. It just takes a binary look at the world and boils it down to pure economics. And Jordan Peterson makes a critique of postmodernists in that, they have just taken this Marxist and used a little bit of sleight of hand and turned it into just groups, so like group ideology.
They're splitting it along so many axioms that basically, like, the one axiom that comes out below, like, what their group is straight white men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you can't take such a simplistic view, a binary view, or even, what I think actually is that you can't take, it's impossible to take too much of a complex view when something is so important. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything, but it means that 99.999% of the takes on society that I hear are something that's a way oversimplified version of how society should be. And also that's because the world is indefinitely difficult and our brains use heuristics and stuff like that in order to be able to manage living in the world. So that's a problem, but
our brains also oversimplify everything. They make complex assumptions that
that's heuristics essentially, and our brains have a framework with how we deal with problems, and fundamentally the framework is so simple, and it's because that's the most fundamental part of our brain too. It's the hippocampus, and you can see that part manifest itself in rats and stuff like that, and that's how people actually learn about what is human nature, if you believe there's such a thing as human nature, which you should, because there is. And it's the same thing as people who say like nature versus nurture or something like that. Like, why does it have to be one or the other? Like, it's obviously some of both.
Yeah. Well, as far as like the nature versus nurture argument, it's about 80% nature, about 20% nurture. Not that you can't like completely fuck up the nurture portion and end up with a total disaster, but
I'm not so sure I'd be willing to say it's 80% to 20%.
As far as
do we know?
We have a rough idea. That's kind of more the rough idea of the range that it's in, but there's some give or take.
Yeah.
Depending on what studies and stuff you read on that. But.
Well, okay. Let's say it is 80-20. There's a lot of people who deny that there is such a thing as human nature. I've seen so many people who, I've seen so many, like, let's say posts on Facebook where people will say people aren't born to hate, people aren't born violent, people aren't born bigoted against women or something like that. And then they'll put, some word in a kid's mouth and he'll say, I love her. Like, she's so awesome. Like, look, he's such a loving person. It's like, to take that kind of naive, simplistic look at the world, like, kids are little savages, man. Kids are most definitely born tribalist savages. They'll hit each other. They'll steal each other's toys. You need to teach that stuff out of them. Dennis Prager says you can teach a kid 1,000 times to say
thank you.
Yeah, you can teach him 1,000. It takes 1,000 times to teach a kid to say thank you, but you don't ever have to teach a kid to take something.
If we were naturally good, we wouldn't have to be taught to say thank you.
Yeah,
I believe that's the full quote.
Yeah, and so he poses a good question too, that a lot of people look at the world and say, why is there bad stuff? Like, why is there poverty? Why is there evil? Why is there bad stuff? That's not how we should be looking at the world. And these are like a lot of the fundamental axioms of religious doctrines. That's why I think I tend to be so, that's why I like them so much. I'm so attracted to them, because the fundamental tenet is the world is bad. People are bad. And so what you really should do is look at the world in a lens like that and say, why is there good? Why is there riches? Why did this kind of stuff happen? And then you stop looking at the world in a lens of resent, and you start to look up to people who are competent enough to achieve things. And so, like, you won't look at the CEO as someone who's exploiting his employees. You could just do it as a thought experiment too. You could still have the same ideology.
Yeah, start looking at the CEO as a guy that did everything right, probably since he was like 14 to get to that point,
or who failed many times, but still came to he it's the bootstrap ideology, they'll call it, I suppose. But resent of the bootstrap ideology, in my opinion, in my estimation, is resent of competence itself, because he's the guy who brought opportunity to hundreds of people, a lot of times thousands of people, and brought jobs to thousands of people and produced so much wealth. That's why I look at looking at economics and productive terms as opposed to demand side, terms, because it's easy to redistribute something that's already been produced, but it's really hard to figure out why things are produced. And so I think that'll give you a different look if you look at the world in that lens than if you looked at the world like you were born amazing and all the world is worse than you, then you can just go out and fix it. I just think it's a naive, simplistic view.
Yeah. I don't know, what else do we want to move on to?
I don't know. I've just been ranting like this whole time. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, I noticed we started off kind of with Zizek, stuff like that.
Yeah. Zizek and Jordan Peterson are super good though. Check it out. Although I don't like the way Zizek talks, I'd much rather read him.
Also, the mics, whoever was in charge of sound was so bad, and then his heavy Slavic accent kind of resonated with everything.
Yeah. The sound guy definitely got it wrong. That's for sure.
Yeah. Or it was just the reverb in the room that could have been it too, but it was.
You want to talk some election stuff? What's new in election politics?
Biden's officially in.
I was listening to Ben Shapiro's take on Biden today. It's pretty interesting.
Hide your wives, hide your kids.
Yeah. I honestly don't know much about Biden. I know that he's been in trouble for this scandals with women and stuff like that. I know he worked under Obama. That worries me because I don't think the American people want 8 years of Obama either. So I do think it would be good that if Trump could identify Biden with Obama again.
But Obama also hasn't come out and endorsed him yet.
Yeah, he's not going to, you reckon?
No, probably not.
It wouldn't be a smart move.
I think Biden, as far as their political relationship, was more of one of convenience because he got the corporate Democrats and stuff to pile behind Obama, which was really important as far as winning, not just getting the minority vote. But
yeah, this is kind of interesting too. There's so much fractioning in the Democratic Party that are they going to be able to get their wheels behind one candidate once they choose one? I was thinking that no, because all the people who voted for voter turnout was big for Hillary the last election. She won the popular vote. I was talking to Zach, I think it's plausible that Trump could lose the popular vote again because everyone who voted for Hillary primarily voted against Trump. Those are going to be the same people, and that's going to happen again. So
it's also going to be getting out the people the Republicans in California, stuff like that wouldn't normally go out to vote because
the Republicans in California don't matter. Look, Trump's not winning California.
I know, but supposedly this is according to Owen, someone who's been there, that there's a lot of Republicans in California that just don't go vote because they know it's kind of pointless. Yeah. So I don't know if Trump continues his focus as far as on the middle of the country and maybe goes to LA or San Francisco or somewhere like that.
Yeah, dude, that's exactly. I think he continues his focus on the middle of the country. He just wants to win the states that he won last time because, like I said, I think everyone who voted for Hillary last time is going to vote for whatever candidate is not Trump this time. And honestly, I don't see the kind of social mobilization that would be needed in order to win a state like California or New York on behalf of Trump.
We'll also see what happens as far as on the meme side, because memes were huge in 2016, and they've had 4 years to change the algorithms to suppress the meme that happened.
Dude, memes are big, especially with this older generation coming onto. I've noticed this, the older generation of people coming onto Facebook. I read an article too that was baby boomers share 3 to 5 times more fake news than people who are our age. I totally believe it because that's I think they're honestly more naive with regards to technology.
Well, they're more naive as far as who to trust on the internet, whether it's the New York Times, just shit post articles, or the CNN.
Yeah, I see stuff like you were talking about memes. A meme is something that I could make in my room, and if it's a good meme that's catchy, You can make a big difference with just making a meme.
Memes also aren't that simple. Meme comes from the Richard Dawkins term of memetics. It is basically evolutionary, like the idea of Darwin's evolutionary ideology applied to ideas. So, like, let's say you have a bird's nest, like those birds also produce more nests.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
You know what else is interesting to think of this on like a linguistic frame too, because you actually can see like I see this all the time where kids will speak a language on the internet that an adult couldn't even understand.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with as far as like YouTube culture. There's a certain like as far as language on how people cut the videos, how people like just clickbait stuff like that. Where if you're in the know, you know what's gonna go on, you know what's gonna be happening. You get the inside jokes. It's kind of
yeah, and so it's like this culture that builds off of itself. I wonder where it really started, or if it's just an internet phenomenon. Because I think Reddit is a big one where like all these internet phrases and stuff start, and so you build this foundation of language that's it's English, but it's like internet slang, and then you just keep building off of that, and eventually, like the two Facebook robots who are talking to each other, you can get to a language that is technically English, but nobody else understands. So it's like such a different dialect of this internet slang.
And that's another thing with like the Christchurch shooter is like if you read his manifesto, I didn't, but there were like a lot of internet shit posters like Sargon of Akkad who kind of went through it and talked about it, where if you read it, it's actually full of memes. Like,
really?
Yes. It's full of memetics, like the media, everyone that came out against him like even in New Zealand responded basically how he said they were going to react.
Dude, this is something crazy. This is something that people don't take seriously too, I think. Like people don't take the silent majority right now seriously. Whether I consider myself a part of that or not, I don't know. But like there's a lot of disenfranchised, just say college kids and high school kids who sit on YouTube and sit on Reddit and sit on this stuff that their parents have never even heard of and find out all this stuff that people haven't heard of. And that's kind of where I think fringe ideology or fringe radical movements come from.
That's one of the interesting things about YouTube also is you have, one of the biggest as far as platforms on YouTube is Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah.
And he has on everyone from like geological conspiracy people to people who have crossed the like Arctic and shit and like.
One thing I admire about Joe Rogan is like he's really willing to talk to just about anyone. Even if it's an alt-right guy, even if it's Alex Jones or, I don't know if he's had Richard Spencer on or not, but like
that would
guy's as wacky as Alex Jones.
That would be one to see. I know Ruben had Spencer on.
Did he?
Yeah, and also Candace.
Is Candace fringe? Would you say a radical?
She's part of TP USA. She's kind of like that.
Yeah, I know Candace Owens is.
Yeah, she's kind of like that boilerplate, like mainstream conservative.
I don't see anything wrong with the stuff that Candace is doing. No. I disagree with her in that like I don't adhere to Trump as much as she does. But
the whole Brexit thing kind of pisses me off. But
yeah. But she's got a lot of solid stuff to say too. And I think that's one thing too that people aren't willing to grant that the other side or people with whom they totally disagree or who they consider like alt-right whack jobs or whatever actually have a lot of stuff to say that makes sense that maybe you've never heard before.
Yeah, like
so it's like even if I hate Alex Jones, I think he's a total whack job. He might have something every once in a while that's like, man, I've never heard that before.
Yep, I'll watch him every now and then and just pull out InfoWars and kind of get through the vitamin ads.
Yeah, so you'll get to like alt-right figures too, like let's say Owen Benjamin or
Nick
people
Flunes, Fox Day.
Yeah, that are like they're anti-Semitic. Like I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that they say, Yeah,
but what they're saying has enough grain of truth in it where you could understand why someone would believe it.
Or even if I was, you could. I could definitely understand why people would believe it or be persuaded by it too.
Yeah.
But even if I'm willing to just disregard like all of the anti-Semitic stuff, let's say, like I'll just disregard 80% of what they say. Then I'll listen to some stuff about the conspiracy theories that they have to say, or the conspiracy theories, like flat Earth or the fake moon landing. All of a sudden, it's like, man, it's at least worth looking into because like I've been so naive and just believing all along that I've never even looked into it. I've wrote it off so much that I'm not even willing to look into it. And if you get to that point, like that's kind of a dangerous point to be at.
Yeah. Well, as an engineering student, as far as Owen's like thing about like getting to the moon, his chemical and material chemistry is so far off that it's like you're just like you got to know better than that. And And also his wife is an engineer.
Also, like, listen, I'm not willing to say he's right on that stuff, but I'm at least willing to look at it and listen to it because, like, it at least makes you think. Like, at least it's fun, you know?
Yeah.
And if you're not ever willing to think about something you disagree with, then, well, you're not a thinker anyway. You're just a puppet for words and stuff like that.
I've also been trying to watch more of Tim Pool lately, but
never seen
him. He kind of blew up like a month or two ago. He had a big thing on Joe Rogan's podcast against Jack Dorsey and the lawyer that Jack Dorsey brought with him. I forget the lawyer's name, but yeah. He's kind of interesting. He's kind of like one of these alt-left guys.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think Fox News has him on every now and then because back when he used to work for Vice, he went to North Korea, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. I have seen this guy.
Yeah.
I knew I recognized the name, but...
Yeah, well, a lot of like good alt media people have come out of the original Vice guys too.
You know Graham Hancock?
Yes.
Have you read any of his books, Fingerprints of the Gods, or watched him on Rogan at least?
I've seen him on Rogan.
Yeah, he's one of those guys too that's like, all right, so Graham Hancock is a guy, check him out. I think it's just really interesting. He's got this alternative look at history and how the anthropological community has this kind of monopoly on force and what gets published and stuff like that. So he's been saying for years that there was a global cataclysm, 10,000 years ago or 11,000 or something. There was a big flood, and so he's been going out finding evidence for these kind of theories, and that there was an advanced civilization before this global cataclysm that hasn't been written into history books like it should have. And I don't believe with everything he says. Like I said, like I think he has a tendency to just believe anything that the authority doesn't say, too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I can totally see where this kind of monopoly on thinking happens, and then all of a sudden reading a book like Fingerprints of the God. Or now he has like New America. I haven't read it yet, but he talked about it in his recent Joe Rogan. It's like, man, it almost just opens up a whole new world to you. And it's like, that's what I live for, is getting a perspective that's like, holy man, maybe that's something I've never heard before. And maybe it's true.
The older JREs with him, he also was with some other geologist.
Yeah, the one he traveled with.
Yeah, that's actually from Minneapolis by us here. And he was pretty interesting as far as just his solo ones too, as far as.
Yeah, man, both those guys are so interesting, and they actually put out some pretty compelling evidence. And also a lot of the evidence that they put out with regards to there having been a global cataclysm 10,000 years ago, back in the, what would it have been? The 80s when he was putting it out, 80s and 90s, the whole anthropological community said he was crazy. I mean, they were actually brutal to this guy. Like they treated him very badly. They attacked him. They threatened him, stuff like that. Now, a lot of the stuff that he was publishing back then is being proven true nowadays. And this has been happening in the anthropological community for decades and decades now.
Yeah, it's been like we've been finding evidence of what he's been saying in ice caps as far as how like what materials would have to be present for a major asteroid impact, stuff like that. Also the fact that like Hudson Bay is still receding as far as like sea level is actually going down, and because the ground is rising in that area. Yeah, forget the actual term for it, but
I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Like it's along the same line of stuff that I've just been fed all this stuff my entire life. And I've never actually looked into it. Like I've heard that there's different theories, but what I've always been taught and believed is that an asteroid hit the Earth and that's what killed all the dinosaurs. But like we don't know. I haven't even begun to look into any of the other ones. Not that it really matters to me, but eventually there's going to be something that does matter, and you can see yourself getting to a world like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, or an Orwellian type world, and it's like, maybe we should be a little more informed about stuff that seemingly doesn't matter to us, because eventually something that does matter is going to happen, the same phenomenon, and we're all just going to be idling along, living our happy old lives.
Yeah.
Well, you got anything else big to say, Mark? I'm getting kind of hungry here, honestly.
Not really. Starting a YAF chapter next fall.
Oh yeah, Young Americans for Freedom next fall at UW Stout. If anyone's here, join the club. You're gonna be the big guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the founder. I'm gonna try to hand it off to someone who might be a little bit more confident than me at running and organizing stuff.
Well, I guarantee it's gonna be a very fruitful YAF chapter. It'll be really interesting.
It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah,
it'll be more interesting. I don't know, like as far as like how many people we could get to join, but
if anyone's in or around the UW Stout area, join this YAF chapter so we can get it going.
Yeah.
So Mark can get it going.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Take it easy.
All right. And